what is going on? Welcome back to another video. Been a little while since I made one, but I've gotten a lot of questions recently, including a few comments from you guys in terms of an update of the McLaren 12C, and I wanted to give you guys an update. And so I put together a pretty substantial list, so bear with me here, but I do want to cover what the first year of ownership was like, and hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I'm hoping the audio will come out okay. I'm in the car now, but I thought what better place to make the video than in the car itself. So let's start with the basics of which model this is, what year, mileage, and everything else related to it. So let's start with that. So this is a 2012. I think they started in 2011. I don't know if there's a 2011 model, but they may have started selling them in late 2011 as 2012. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, because I'm not sure. I have seen people making comments on the forums that they got their cars late in 2011, but I think they're all 2012 and up. So anyways, this is a 2012. When I looked around, I looked at a 570S, I looked at a 650S, and kind of sat around for a while, drove a couple of them, and ended up on the 12C. That was the car that was within my budget itself, right? I didn't want to spend more. I think it was about 125 was the max that I wanted to spend. And actually, you could get very close to a 570S, like a 2016, and a 650S at the time when I was looking. But I sat around for a year, and then of course, with the pandemic and everything else, the prices skyrocketed. So anyways, I found this one up in Carolina, Tactical Fleet, and loved the car, had a good service history. I didn't want too low mileage because, and we'll get into that later, if the car hasn't been driven, some of the earlier issues may have not been sorted out, and you kind of want to stay away from that. You kind of want to get a car that's been driven, because more than likely it had the issues and it was taken into service. So I landed on this one. It's a 2012. It's a pure black. It's an MSO color. There's a pretty good option in terms of colors, but that's one of the really cool things about McLaren. They'll pretty much do anything you want if you're willing to pay for it, right? And there's a lot of options, a lot of configurations you can get. So this particular one does have an MSO color, which is pure black, and it was not an original factory color. And as far as options, mine is sort of in the middle of the pack. It's not highly optioned out, but it does have the things that I wanted. For example, it does have the carbon ceramic brakes. Those were an option. So not every single 12C will have carbon ceramic brakes. Most of them will have the steel brakes. Now, when you go to the 650S, that's one of the key differences between the two. The 650S has, I think almost all of them are carbon ceramic, if I remember correctly. So anyways, I wanted the carbon ceramic brakes. So this has the bigger brakes, they're carbon ceramics, and they're 6 piston calipers versus 4 piston calipers. The interior, as you can see, is it's kind of funky. It's not for everybody. It's harissa red and it's full leather. Most of these will be cloth, like a sport cloth with the Alcantara roof. Not sure if you can see that there. So I didn't really have a preference. Whichever one I found that I liked, I was okay with either one, either the sport cloth or partial leather or Alcantara seats. I really didn't care. And so this one is it's black on the outside and red interior. I liked it. My Camaro, actually my Mustang was like that. It was black on red interior, so I was okay with that. No issues there. The other few options that this has is the sport exhaust. So that does give it a little bit nicer sound, in my opinion. And there are two differences between the Spider or the hardtop convertible and the Coupe. The Coupe doesn't have resonators, so it's a little bit louder. The Spider will have resonators even with the sport exhaust, so it's a little bit quieter, I guess, because when you have the top down, maybe McLaren thought it was just too loud. The exhaust is actually Inconel too, so it's a little bit lighter, I believe, than the standard stainless steel exhaust that you would get. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then it also has the super light wheels, and the super light wheels were an option. I think there's 3 wheel options that you could get, but those are definitely the lighter ones. And it does make a difference for handling, for responsiveness, because that rotational mass is much lower than you would have. So I do love that. And it also had the I'm gonna say the black pack or the midnight pack. I forget what it's called from McLaren, but basically everything is blacked out on the car. The exhaust tips, anything that would have been a different color is blacked out. So I thought that was pretty nice. So that's the car itself. 2012 MP4-12C, pure black, harissa red interior, sport exhaust, carbon ceramic brakes, but no carbon fiber options, which was kind of a bummer. I really wanted carbon fiber on the interior. You can get carbon fiber on the doors, on the interior, and of course back in the engine bay itself. The good news is, if you don't find one that has all that, which most 12Cs actually do have at least the interior carbon fiber pack, you can get the aftermarket stuff. It's on eBay, it's on AliExpress. I mean, there's a bunch of different places that sell it, and it's gonna run you about $2,200 if you get it on AliExpress. If you get it in the US, about $4,000, and that'll give you everything carbon fiber, the AC, the center stack, and you can even do the vents if you want to. So in terms of the design, right, beauty, as they say, is in the eyes of the beholder. Some people love this car, some people hate it. I think it's an absolute classic, and I will be honest, at first I wasn't a huge fan of the design itself. You know, I don't think it was aggressive enough for a supercar. You know, I guess compared to like the Ferrari 458 at the time, the Huracan. Well, actually it competed against the Lamborghini Gallardo. So, you know, again, it's up to the person, right, if you like it or not. But I think it's aged really well. I think it's going to be a timeless design, not too aggressive. It's not going to be dated quickly. So, you know, I'm pretty happy with it. In terms of the quirkiness of the car, you know, you've got the LED tail lights. That's probably my least favorite thing on this car. Some people hate the swipe doors. If you don't know, the 12C, the first ones, don't have a button to open the door or a door handle at all. And so what you have to do is you have to find that spot, is that the door, kind of where the door, the back part of the door towards the back of the car meets the frame, and you have to kind of swipe carefully there. Some people joke and say find the G spot itself, right? So you know, you do have to have skills to find that. And you know, I haven't had any issues. As they get older, it does get a little harder for them to open, because if you find this spot, you swipe, it doesn't lift right away, especially as your struts start to go and they start to fail, or they're just older and tired, right, the door struts, then it won't pop the door open right away. So you kind of have to do it a couple of times. I personally have become very used to it. I like it because it's also like a theft deterrent. Even if you had the keys for the car and, you know, the car was unlocked, it doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna be able to get in the car itself. So I think that's a plus. Not everybody knows, you know, every time I valet park the car or take it somewhere, they struggle to open the car to get in. So I think it's a little nice extra theft, you know, deterrent with the car itself. So I don't have an issue with the doors. Now, with that said, that's one really cool thing about the 12C. It is a true supercar. You do get the dihedral doors, which I love. They're unique to McLaren, the way they go up and out. And it's just cool. It's a conversation piece pretty much anywhere you go. You know, people are always like, wow, really cool. When I'm putting gas in it, you know, people are asking for rides, for pictures. So it does, you know, draw a lot of attention whenever you take it out in public. So if you don't want a lot of attention, maybe it's not the car for you. But I think it's really cool. It's really unique. Another thing that I love, it's the single wiper arm. I think that's super cool. You really don't see that, you know, very often, and throughout history it's only like on supercars and some really nice, you know, hypercars and whatnot, like the Koenigsegg's, and some of those have the single wiper arm, which is really cool. Of course, the old Mercedes used to have a single wiper arm too, which was, I always loved that feature. So I like it. I think it does a, you know, my windshield's really dirty, but you can kind of see, maybe the camera will pick it up, maybe it won't, but you can kind of see how far it goes. I've never had any issues, and I've driven this car in the rain plenty of times. I'm not afraid to drive it, you know, like some folks, oh, it's never been in the rain. This one has, so if you don't want one that's been in the rain, too bad, so sad. Nothing happens to the cars, believe me. It's not, you know, damaged, it's not ruined. It's actually a British car, and if you're familiar with the UK and UK weather, you know, it rains all the time. So I think they kept that in mind. And there's actually a water penetration test that they do with these. They put it in a booth with a lot of high pressure water to see if there are any leaks. So again, the car was designed to get wet, no issues there whatsoever. So anyways, you got the cool dehydro doors. You know, another really cool thing is the proactive chassis control that I love about the car. That's the adjustable hydraulic suspension. It's extremely unique to the car. Many sports cars, SUVs and whatnot, especially now, have adjustable suspension, but very few have a hydraulic adjustable suspension. In fact, I can count them in one hand: Rolls-Royce, McLaren, and a few others. And not all McLarens, by the way. The sports series, which is the 570, the 600, they don't have the hydraulic suspension. They still have adjustable suspension, but it truly is like having 3 cars in one. Right now I'm coasting. It's fairly quiet. It's super soft, but it's still firm, where it's not gonna roll or anything like that. But it is very, you know, compliant with the road, with bumps, with cracks, with potholes. Never had any issues, and it makes for a really smooth driving car. Same thing with the drivetrain, right? Because you can adjust the shift modes, how aggressive you want it to be, from normal to sport to track. And so, you know, I think it's an amazing car, because when I'm just cruising around like right now making a video, I want the car to be nice and calm and you know, compliant with the road, where I'm not jumping everywhere and it's, you know, jittering your teeth loose. And so that's pretty nice, you know, to have that. Another thing I really like is the air brake itself. So you've got active aero in the back, and it's really cool because, you know, one of the things that McLaren talks about is when you're at the track or just driving fast, going at high speeds, and you hit the brakes, you tend to shift a lot of the weight towards the front, obviously. And what that does is it can unsettle the car sometimes, especially when you're doing 150, 160s. And this car will do 200 all day long. At the track, I've hit 150, 160, no problem. I've had it up to 170 before. It gets up there pretty easily. So when you get on those brakes really hard and you shift the weight forward, that's where the active air brake pops up. And what that does is it creates so much drag back there that it keeps the air and the pressure over that rear axle. So the car's more stable, won't get unsettled as easily. And again, that'll help you in high-speed cornering, you know, stopping from really fast speeds very quickly. And of course, the carbon ceramic brakes are amazing. I've been told the steel brakes are also really good. As you guys know, carbon ceramics are typically more track focused, and they do take some getting used to, because when they're cold, they do brake a little bit different than when they're warm. And so you do want to get used to it. It took me about I would say a couple of weeks after I picked up the car. I've never had a car with carbon ceramic brakes before. And McLaren, everything is hydraulic. The brakes, the steering, the suspension, and it's all connected too, which we'll get into that. That can be good and bad. But the feeling is amazing. The steering is razor sharp. It's extremely precise. The suspension is, I mean, like no other car I've ever owned. And I've had Vipers, Corvettes, a bunch of sports cars. I've had aftermarket suspensions. The Viper had an $8,000 aftermarket coilover suspension. This is still better than anything else I've personally owned, and I stand by it. So anyways, you've got the air brake, and let's talk about some of the things that are not so great. And that's, you'll see my list down here, because I do want to hit on all the you know, the different topics. But I'm listening to Monica, The Boy Is Mine, of course. But the iris system, it's okay for what it is. I've got the iris 2. The way you can tell is you'll see there's a back button and a voice button. That's how you can tell you've got iris 2. Iris 1 does not have those buttons. And iris 1, from what I've heard, is still pretty good. It's just the Bluetooth doesn't work very well. That's what I've been told. I have no experience with it. And these cars all came with iris 1 and were later either upgraded or offered with the iris 2 system. Mine was upgraded in 2018, I think, is what the McLaren dealer told me. And it's already broken. Just so you guys know, it was $13,000 to upgrade, and this part of the screen doesn't respond to touch. This part does, but I don't have any issues with it. I can still do everything I need to do, and most of the times I just plug my phone and put Spotify or iTunes or, you know, any other music listening or streaming services. So it is what it is. It's Meridian, and it's got these little speakers on the doors, the Meridian sound system. it sounds pretty good. Those are the drivers. It's got, I think, speakers up front at the top somewhere, and there's speakers behind me as well, and those are actually blown, but it still sounds pretty good. I just adjusted the fader to just be in the front. No issues there, but I would like to upgrade them at some point or replace them. So everything's pretty good there. You know, proactive chassis. It's awesome. The best I've ever had in any car. You know, fully adjustable. Like I said, 3 cars in one. The air brake is pretty cool, and you know, you can definitely feel it when that thing pops up. You feel the drag helping you slow down really quickly. The design is great. Like I said, some people love it, some people hate it. I think it's aging really well. And then finally, just to summarize that section, you know, I think the overall quality is pretty good. I've got a few rattles here and there, mostly coming from the door cards. They're pretty easy to fix from what I've been told. You know, it's just little plastic clips that with time, from being maybe popped off in the past, they tend to go bad. Some of the things that also do go bad in this car are these little screens. You can get better replacements now, and it's pretty easy to DIY that yourself. The dealer will charge you a lot, and we'll get into what the cost for the first year with the car is, but those tend to go bad, and it's mostly from slamming the doors down. So one of the things you can do is you can actually upgrade to soft close doors, and you can actually use Tesla motors if you want, or you can pick up the McLaren soft close motors for about $1,200. There's videos already from the Magnetic guys, from Sean and a few others, on how to do the soft close update. That's something I definitely want to do, as well as other preventive maintenance, like the hoses and clamps, pretty notorious from failing. So that's another thing I want to address. And there's things like the oil tank. So anyways, that's the overall quality for the most part. Let's talk about performance and handling now. So that's pretty straightforward. You know, the car, even though it's 10 years old, still performs like a supercar today, costing $400,000, $300,000. Keeps up with a lot of the new electric cars that are pretty fast, and those numbers are pretty straightforward. You know, I think at launch the 12C had 592 horsepower, and McLaren later pretty quickly issued a software upgrade, and it's pretty easy to do, that bumped the power to 616. Now this is the M838T engine, made it to a 7-speed sequential shift gearbox, the SSG, which is phenomenal. And the motor is a 3.8 liter, making, like I said, 616 horsepower, because mine does have the software update. It's got the sport exhaust, and that, you know, to me is more than plenty. The car's about 3,100 pounds, 3,200 pounds, somewhere around there. So it's pretty light compared to some of the cars today that are 4,000, 5,000 pounds. And, you know, for the motor itself, as you can see, it revs to 8,500 RPMs, which is pretty amazing. You don't even have to take it up that high. Once you hit about, I would say, 6,500, there's really no need to go any higher than that. And it's plenty. You know, the engine is a flat plane crank V8 twin turbo, which is just amazing. Makes a lot of amazing sounds. You know, let me give you a little taste here. You can kind of hear the boost. Another thing I love is the infamous rockers. I wish they were a little bit bigger for the shift paddles, but I can upshift by pushing forward on either side, or vice versa, or then downshift if I pull back on it. You can see how easy it is, upwards or downwards, or, you know, up or down. And so in terms of the performance, you know, I've taken it to the quarter mile. I haven't done a track event yet. I need to. I gotta get it ready for track day. And I ran an 11 flat without using launch control, which is pretty amazing, because most other 12Cs, you know, they've done 10.3, 10.5 using launch control, maybe some drag radials. So for today's standards, that's still pretty amazing in my opinion. It's really, really solid numbers. I mean, if you need anything faster than that, you probably, you know, not going to be able to enjoy most of that on a road anyways. So, you know, I think performance wise, I don't need any more. However, if it's not enough for you, M Engineering, and there's a couple other companies out there, they have a tune. You send your ECU to them, they do their own custom tune on there, and then you can have multiple maps on here and easy to change on those maps. You can, you know, add for backfire, you know, different fuel types. And then if you do downpipes and exhaust, you're talking about an extra anywhere from 50 to 80 horsepower to the wheels. And then you can also upgrade the turbos, do some meth injection. There's a lot of performance. I've seen a couple of these get up to the 1,000 horsepower. I don't know how reliable they'll be with that kind of power, but it seems to last a pretty good while. And, you know, again, that's a high mid 9-second car, which again, anything new, you're going to be right there in terms of performance, and not, you know, not break the bank with $1 million on what the performance numbers are going to be for some of those. Now, if you can afford it, hey, more power to you, go for it. So that's my opinion on performance. Track wise, like I said, I've not been to a road track, but I have seen plenty of videos on what these cars can do. And in the hands of a capable driver, they are absolutely, you know, up there with anything that's brand new today and track oriented. They will humiliate a lot of sports cars, you know, set records at some of the tracks. So it's still extremely fast. Again, remember, McLaren built this car on a blank sheet. You know, they started with a blank sheet and basically no expenses spared, right? And McLaren, if you're not familiar with McLaren or F1, have one of the most colorful, you know, racing pedigree of any company out there. In fact, I don't even know if they wanted to make cars. They're more known for winning at the track. Of course, if you follow F1 in recent times, I think they only have one podium finish by Danny Rick in the last 10 years, I think, something like that. So anyways, they got to get back to winning. But when this car was built, McLaren was one of the most dominant F1 companies and other forms of racing out there. So, you know, again, it's a racing company with a racing pedigree, and this car, they spare no expenses in building this car. So that's the performance. Unlimited capabilities, in my opinion. But even if you leave it stock, there's not a lot of cars that are going to embarrass you or pull away from you. So now let's talk about the reason why you probably clicked on this video, and that is, what is the yearly maintenance cost to own a McLaren 12C or a supercar, just to get an idea, right? So I'm going to break this down in things that I paid someone to do and things that I did myself in DIY mode, right? And some things that broke that were not supposed to break, but it happens, you know, not very common failure, but it happened. Some things I replaced that I actually didn't need to replace. I just, you know, misdiagnosed the problem, and in trying to save money, I spent a little bit more. And some things I just didn't want to do, and so I paid someone to take care of. So when I got the car, it had about 12,500 or 600 miles, somewhere around there. I've now driven the car about 6,500 miles in the first year. I drove it a lot. It's so much fun to drive. If, you know, I'm telling you, I was careful, you know, not to put so many miles on it, because if I wasn't going to keep it, they do depreciate a lot, and mileage is everything on supercars and sports cars. The more mileage you have, the more they depreciate, right? But again, you don't buy these cars, and don't buy a car as an investment. I just don't want to get my teeth kicked in, you know, either if I put too many miles and I decide I don't want to keep it. And so, but I did put a lot of miles. I think most people drive 1,000, 1,200 miles, typically because they have more than one vehicle, or 2 or 3 or 10, you know, depending on what kind of collection you have. And I'm spitting everywhere. So I drove about 6,500 miles. I bought it, you know, about a year and a month ago. I bought it in December, so this past December in 2022 would have been my first full year with the car. So what did I do in all that year? So one of the first problems that I had was the infamous PCC error, and that'll pop up on the little screen on the left, and what that does is it won't let you switch any of the modes over here. So when you go try to turn the active panel on, that's what this is called, where you can adjust the transmission, the driving, the handling, etc. It throws an error and basically won't change modes. The most common reason for that to happen is the accumulators. Earlier I mentioned that this suspension is hydraulic, and it's all interconnected with the steering and some other stuff. And so I think the air brake might actually be connected. I can't remember. But anyways, when that error pops up, typically it means, at least from all the research that I did, talking to a few McLaren specialists, they said, oh yeah, it's the accumulators, right? So I'm like, okay, I've watched, there's a bunch of DIY videos. I have my own now. You can watch, I'll link it down below. And so I thought, let me start there. It seems like the most, cost-effective thing to do, because if you go in for a diagnosis, that's $500 anyways, and I found the accumulators for about $1,200. The dealer wants about $400, and you need 4, by the way, on this car. And the 650S has them, the 12C, the 675, the P1, they all have the 720. Pretty much all the Super Series cars and above will have. The 570s don't have that, so if you are considering this in a 570, that's one less thing you won't have to worry about. And so anyways, I found them for about $1,200, did the job, and it fixed the error, but for about a month, and then it came back again. And I was pretty pissed. I'm like, man, what's the deal? And so what happened is I ended up having a failure on the APMU. That's the automatic pressure, I always forget the freaking name of it, automatic pressure unit, for the suspension. This is what it has, valves on there, and the 2 front accumulators on the 12C are attached to it, and then there's 2 at each wheel in the back where the suspension and the shocks go. In the 650S, they're no longer attached to the APMU, which makes it easier to switch to. You don't have to take the whole frunk apart like you do in this one. All you have to do is take the wheels off, the wheel wells off, or the covers, the liners, and the accumulators are right there. But anyways, I replaced them, $1,200. Then the APMU, it started giving me the error again, and I once again I called my buddy Kevin at Supercar Garage ATL, who's phenomenal, has been a tremendous asset and help in maintaining and owning this car. Just a wealth of knowledge, always helpful. So highly recommend, if you are in the market, they can do PPI, give him a call, or Sean from Magmatics. They're the same group, so those guys work together, and I would definitely recommend reaching out to them to get this stuff sorted out. So anyways, what I was getting at is that the APMU failed, and that is not a common failure, but it did. So I called and messaged Storney Motorsports, who knows a lot about these. They have a massive shop in the UK, all over the world. I called Kevin. We put the diagnostics machine. So I'm right now about $1,700 of parts for the accumulators, for the APMU, and I did it myself. Like I said, if you have to pay somebody, that's gonna be a little more expensive, of course. Labor, I would say it's probably in the $170 to $200 range, and you're looking at least 4 hours for the APMU, if not more. And again, the cost of the part itself, McLaren will charge a lot more if you can even find it. The accumulators are more readily available. You can go to McLaren Life, you can go to some of the groups, and people will post them, or they're able to source them. I'm not sure from where. And there's been research trying to find to see who makes them, and it's gone nowhere, right? Because APMUs are pretty common, and there's a lot of systems, especially commercial systems, that use accumulators. So there's been a movement trying to find to see if you can source them cheaper. But like I said, about $180 to $250 if you get them from the McLaren Life guys or some of the others, to $400 per, and you need 4 if you get them from McLaren. So then one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to get all my fluids up to date, right? A lot of the services had been done when I called McLaren. When I checked with the McLaren service center, they had maintained the car pretty well, but I didn't know when the last time they did any of that, if ever. So one of the things I did is I had Kevin at Supercar Garage ATL do a couple of things. It's kind of like they do a full maintenance on everything just to bring the car up to speed. And what I did is I had them do the air filters. That's also pretty simple, something you can do yourself. You can get aftermarket air filters for about $200, but because this was all one job, I decided to just have them do it. And one of the services performed when they do the air filters is they clean out the NVH foam. That's the noise you know, dampening noise so that it can quiet down the intake a little bit, because they tend to break down over time. And when they break down, all that foam is getting sucked into the filters and maybe even into the engine itself. But at worst case scenario, it'll really clog up your air filters, which takes away from the performance of the car, of course. So I had him do the air filters. We also did the 20,000 mile clutch service because they had never been done on this car. And even though I think when I did that, I only had 16,000 miles. I figure, why not? I mean, we're right there. The car's 10 years old. Again, keep in mind, these cars are between 10 to 8 years old now. So just because you don't have the mileage all the way up there, it doesn't mean that that oil isn't old. It could have some moisture in there. The filters could be clogged from the debris that is filtering. So, you know, why not go ahead and do that? So they put a new filter, new Liqui Moly 1800 or 8100 dual clutch gear oil. Then they also did the 40, that's for the clutch. Then they did the 40,000 mile transmission service. Again, I don't have that kind of mileage, but I wanted to take care of all that and just do all the fluids on the car. And that also includes a little filter. The parts are actually not very expensive, and you can DIY all this stuff yourself. I didn't want to because I honestly don't like messing with transmission stuff. The oil, you know, the engine I can do myself, but it is, you know, it is not as easy. You have to raise the car up, you have to remove body panels. And since they were doing this already, I said, you know, might as well do the oil since we're there. So we did the 40,000 mile transmission service, which includes a new filter. That's Liqui Moly 75 weight 90 and synthetic hypoid gear oil, right? So they did that. And then while we were in there, we also did the brake fluid flush. And they basically drained the old fluid, because I am thinking about going to the track. So I figured, you know, I don't know, again, how old is that oil? How long has it been in the car? You're supposed to change that every 2 years or 3 years. The accumulators, again, those are consumables. So those need to be replaced every 3 to 4 years, I think, depending on how you drive, how often, how you track the car and all that stuff. And I think the cabin air filter. So all that stuff, because they had the car up, they had all the body panels, trays underneath removed, so might as well do all that. That whole service came to, I think it was $3,580. It's expensive, and again, if you do all that yourself, you will save about $3,000. All the oil and transmission and clutch fluids and filters you can buy for about $500 and just do it yourself. And it'll probably be an 8 hour, you know, if you do it all, about an 8 to 10 hour job, depending if you have a lift, if you have to jack up the car and put it on stands. It just all depends on, you know. I think I'm talking too much. Anyways, the battery just died, but I wanted to recap the total. Once again, you can save a lot of money if you DIY yourself. I didn't want to mess with the transmission fluid. I didn't want to mess with all that. So to me, I was okay paying with that. And again, some of the failures and some of the parts I replaced, I didn't have to. So technically, if you did it yourself, if I had done all the fluid changes myself, I probably would have only spent $500 on the car, and then the $1,700 or so with the APM Hyundai accumulators. So about half of the $5,500. But that is my total for the first year, 6,500 miles driven. I've loved every single one of them. The car is amazing. I think they're the most undervalued supercar out there. And, you know, only time will tell, but to me, there's no reason why these cars shouldn't be worth double. So get one while you still can. I highly recommend them, highly love them, highly enjoy them. Easy to live with, you know, in terms of drivability, daily use. Like I said, you can daily drive this car. It's so comfortable, no issues whatsoever. I get about 16, 17 miles on bumper to bumper traffic. I get about 24 to 26 miles on the highway itself. So this thing will do great, you know, and can easily be daily driven every day. Seats are really comfortable. Like I said, I've got the normal. Some of these you could get with the P1 seats, which are a little more aggressive, but these seats are perfect. They're adjustable. These are powered. I've got the power. I think that was an option as well, the power seats. You can see it's weird where they put the controls. They're also heated, which is kind of nice right now. It's kind of cool here where I'm at. And so it's nice to have the little heated seats. Plenty of cargo space. There's cargo space back there where you can put something not super heavy. I think 30 pounds or 20 pounds is the most they say, but you know, it's just a little shelf. You can put a bag, some stuff back there. And of course you've got the front where you can store 2 big bags. You can easily do like a weekend trip, you know, with overnight, you know, carry-on luggage, something like that, or just a couple of duffel bags that you can throw in there. I've done a few 4 or 5 hour trips in this thing, and it has been phenomenal. Like I can't complain. So here we are merging, and like I said, visibility is great. No issues whatsoever seeing, you know, who's behind me, around me, and whatnot. And then finally, I'll just summarize, you know, my thoughts, final thoughts on the car. Comment below, let me know what you guys think. Are you looking for one? You know, what other questions do you have? But like anything else, I highly recommend, you know, the car. I love it. It's been great, drives great, and it can be a multitask tool. You can go to the track, you can commute to work, do a spirited mountain run. I mean, anything you want. It's pretty easy to do in this car, pretty easy to live with, pretty easy to get in and out, plenty of cargo space. Mileage is perfect when you're not romping on it all the time. So let's summarize now the whole thing. So in summarizing the car itself, like anything else, you know, after 1 year, might be too early to tell, too soon. Maybe I've been fortunate, but it's been great. You know, I'm getting ready to do the next oil change on this thing, so it'll be my 2nd oil change in 1 year. That's really important to make sure you do your oil changes, because the cam phasers, for example, are some of the things that can fail on these things, and that's about a $15,000 job, if not more, because they got to drop the motor and take it apart, put the new cam phasers, which are going to be about $2,000. Especially if you do it yourself, you got to buy a tool that's about $1,700 to lock the cams in place as you remove the cam phasers. Anyways, do your oil changes frequently. Check the oil. The car has a good way to check the oil. Once you get it to about 190 Fahrenheit or 80 or 90 Celsius, I believe. I think they recommend 80 Celsius when you get the temperature. Always check the oil, see where it's at, keep an eye on that stuff, and keep an eye on, of course, your water temps and everything else. So I love it. Yes, I would absolutely recommend the car after 1 year of ownership. My cost to own it for the first year is about 4%. You know, I've owned boats before, so I'm used to breaking out another $1,000. So maybe I'm conditioned for that, you know, with the abuse from owning boats. But just know, you know, my situation was pretty unique. It could be more, it could be less. And some of the things I didn't have to replace. And if you DIY, you'll definitely save some money. But if you don't DIY, that's what I spent, $5,500, with a combination of paying a shop to do some of the work and doing some of the work myself. The good thing is, you know, I think the cars have bottomed out. I don't think they're gonna go any low. I hope they don't. And you know, they're only gonna go up in value. I've seen this with a lot of other cars. They've got about an 8 to 10 year where they constantly decline, especially with supercars. There's nothing else like this car out there. Carbon fiber monocell, the hydro doors, you know, twin turbo, 3.8 liter flat plane crank V8, making over 600 horsepower, revenue 8,500. You've got the active air brake, single wiper arm. It is such a unique car that it truly is crazy to me that you can buy this car for that cheap. But anyways, you know, always do a PPI before you buy a car, before you make an investment this big. That's a pre-purchase inspection. Again, magnetics are a great source. I've seen them do thousands, maybe I'm exaggerating, but I've seen them do hundreds. I follow Sean on Instagram, and he's always flying, literally, to go either do a PPI or work on a McLaren. So I know he's got a ton of experience. Same thing with my friend Sean at Supercar Garage ATL. Again, they work together. So, or Kevin, I mean, at Supercar Garage ATL. But any one of those guys, if not, take it to a dealer or find a really reliable, you know, look on the forums, go on the groups and ask for a recommendation for somebody to do a PPI for you before you buy the car. And I mean, for me personally, I think I would avoid low mileage cars. You know, I think somewhere between 13 to 20,000 mileage for a 12C is pretty good, even higher. Because again, keep in mind, the more they've driven the car, the more likely is that they have found any issues with the car. And so if a car sits and is not driven, those issues probably haven't been found yet, and they're more than likely to happen on your watch. And if you don't have a warranty, you better get your wallet ready, because it's going to be pretty pricey. So again, avoid low mileage cars. That's what I've read from a lot of people. That's my personal opinion, you know, in terms of what kind of 12C to get, but totally up to you. And the DIY community keeps growing. I myself have added some contribution to it, but I see it growing every day, and I think that's going to help in giving owners confidence as we move forward with these cars, right? The more resources, the more DIY stuff that's out there, also means the less you can expect to spend in ownership of a car. So anyhow, I rambled on for way too long. Thank you for watching, guys. If you have any questions, let me know. But I really did want to give you as much detail as possible in my first year with this car. And in terms of values of the car, I think they have pretty much stayed about where I got mine. I paid a little bit more for mine because the dealer I got it from does, you know, it is a little more expensive, but I do like that they specialize in nothing but supercars. And the GM there actually worked for McLaren, and so at some point, you know, or a lot of times, they have more McLaren in stock than some of the McLaren dealers around here. So anyhow, do your research, go drive them. They're amazing cars. You won't regret it. You'll love every minute of it. And I'll catch you guys on the next video. Thanks for watching.